Okay, good morning to you all and greetings from very sunny Helsinki. I would like to warmly welcome you all to this webinar, Enhancing Disability Inclusive Practices in Humanitarian Action and Volunteer Management, an overview of a collaborative approach. This webinar is the first in a set of webinars that the European Disability Forum, so EDF, will conduct during this EU-funded project. The name of this EU project is very long. Technical Assistance in Humanitarian Response, Ensuring Valuable International Volunteering and Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities. So VIVID for short. Just to give a short overview of the project, it aims at disability inclusion in humanitarian action and volunteering, and to create a community of practice. I won't go into further detail of the project now, as there will be a presentation on the project later on. And yes, I'm very happy to see that there are so many of you here. Actually, just heard that over 130 persons have registered for this webinar today. So I think this is excellent. As for me, I'm Rea Konttinen from Abilis Foundation in Finland. Abilis Foundation is one of the consortium members in this project, and I will be the moderator of this webinar today. In addition, there is also
There's no sound. Can you maybe try and turn it on and off again?
Hi, Rea, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
No, we can't hear you. Your sound is off. Maybe you can try to turn, like to plug and unplug your speakers, your headphones, because you have a. Okay, now.
Because I'm with my phone. Hello?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you perfectly. Thank you so much.
Should I start from the beginning?
No, we just lost you. No, I don't remember exactly, but you were introducing yourself, so.
You're breaking up, actually. I couldn't hear you.
We heard you until your introduction from Abilis Foundation. So we actually we missed just a little bit the last part.
Okay, I still can't hear you guys very well. Okay. So if I understood correctly, you heard me until about Abilis?
Yes.
Okay, so in addition to me, there's Marion and Raquel from EDF, who will be helping out with the technical issues. So if there are any problems, please write in the questions box. And if you have any questions, please write them in the chat box. This webinar will take an hour. We have 3 presentations, after which there is time for questions. So firstly, we will have a presentation about the European Solidarity Corps, which is the new EU program through which volunteering will be funded in the future. Then there will be a presentation about the VIVID project, like I said before. And lastly, we will hear a practical example of volunteering. And yes, some technical issues. So there is real-time international sign language interpretation going on all the time, and captioning also. The seminar will also be recorded and shared later, so you can access it anytime you want. And like said, if there are any technical problems, Marianne and Raquel will help you out. Okay, so I think now it's time to start. So I would like to give the floor to the first speaker of the day, Ruard Wallis de Vries from the European Commission. So Ruard, please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rea, and welcome everybody. I will now share my webcam with you. I hope that works. Thank you for having me this morning. I will also try to speak slowly because I know the sound is not perfect. If there is a problem, please write in the chat box. I'm following that from here as well. Hold on. There is a webcam issue, I believe. Okay, I will just keep talking until further notice, okay? And in the meantime, I try to fix the webcam from here. So I have a few slides for you, which is basically a short explanation about the European Solidarity Corps. When you talk about the core, don't pronounce the T and the S at the end. Very important. It's a French word, actually, I believe. And this European Solidarity Corps was started up around 2015 with some work by the then President of the European Commission, President Juncker, who saw a clear need for the youth in Europe to get more active in their communities, in other countries as well, as volunteers, and to organize this in a more, you could say, international way. So on top of local volunteering projects and initiatives, the Commission saw a need also for cross-border volunteerism, for instance. So where does all this fit in with your projects and your initiative? Well, after some years of European Solidarity Corps, we will now expand. I think I'm visible again, yes. What will happen in the coming years is that the European Solidarity Corps will be expanded with what we call a Humanitarian Aid Strand. We can go to the next slide if you want. Yeah, and that next strand is called the Humanitarian Aid Strand. That's how we call it, and between colleagues we call it HUMAID. We think it's snappier and easier to remember. If we move to the next slide, please, then I can show you a little bit the structure of that future European Solidarity Corps that will actually be operational from next year on. So it's important to remember that the overview you see here will be our structure for the next actually 6-7 years until 2027. So what you see here is solidarity activities addressing societal challenges. Solidarity is the key word of the European Solidarity Corps. And how do we translate that into actions? Well, you see three, you might call them activities as well: volunteering activities, traineeships and job activities, and grassroots solidarity projects. That is what actually is, you might say, the basic European Solidarity Corps as it is until 2020, until this year. Now, from next year on, you see that bright yellow star. That's where the new strand appears, and that is all about solidarity activities in support of humanitarian aid operations. So humanitarian aid is, you might say, entering the Solidarity Corps. And where does that come from? Well, you as project coordinators of VIVID know this very well, as you have this current project approved in the EU Aid Volunteers initiative. And that particular initiative will be discontinued at the end of this year officially, and will be, you might say, transferred with some changes into the European Solidarity Corps. So this is where this new bright star comes into the Solidarity Corps. Now, to talk a little bit about the content, is a bit of a risky affair because there are a few unknown factors, you might call them. One is obviously that we are preparing the details, the operational details. Another one is that this whole structure you see still has to be officially approved by the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers in Brussels. Those are the legislative powers that have to have the final word, and we're waiting for that still. And there is always the question of the budget, which also has to be decided still. But bearing in mind all this, the Commission's proposal is there in front of you, and to cut a complicated story short, we expect to be starting at the beginning of 2021. There are some common actions to both strands, which you see there at the slide. The first one is networking activities, meaning that we facilitate the access to the core for organizations like yours. There are possibilities to get in touch with other like-minded organizations. There is help for project management and project preparation as well. Very important issue is the quality label, which will be, you might say, the access to the project to get funded. You will need a quality label to actually start the activity and to be able to come with an application. Capacity building and training activities. Again, these are activities we foresee not just to help you, but also your partners, for instance, in third countries where you want to start up humanitarian aid actions. I'm thinking of training, let's say, local participants there in the host country, or mentorship, or other lasting activities. I suggest we go 2 slides further. We skip the next one. And I will tell you a little bit about where we are. That one we skip because it's redundant by now. We move fast in Brussels sometimes. Please, the next one. Yes. So to tell you a little bit about where we are, as I said, we are preparing the operational issues. We need to, what we need to do actually when we talk about the humanitarian aid part of the core, we need to somehow marry the EU Aid Volunteers initiative, of which you are a part now, with the existing practice of the European Solidarity Corps. And for that, I have a little thing to show you here. I brought it home with me actually. The European Solidarity Corps guide, which you also find online. It's easy to Google. And I would suggest all of you to, if you're interested in coming up with projects in the future in volunteerism, to read that guide and to check that guide. It will be renewed later in the year, but the current version gives you a good idea of what this, these principles of the Solidarity Corps are about. And I will pick out one of them, which is social inclusion. So this is important, I believe, particularly for your organization. And perhaps it's good to know also that from the outset, the European Solidarity Corps has quite a high participation of young people with fewer opportunities. In fact, it is a cornerstone of the Solidarity Corps to offer them opportunities to volunteer. So just to let you know a little bit, quoting from this guide, social inclusion is central. And then there are a couple of definitions of social inclusion, so a couple of positions. And first one is actually about young people with disabilities. And we define that as follows. Disability, that's to say, participants with special needs related to people with mental, physical, sensory, or other disabilities. So for this category of young people, there are special provisions in the European Solidarity Corps, including some extra support financially. It's all in the guide. It would be impossible in the 1 minute I have left to explain them to you. But what the central message is here is the following. We have this humanitarian aid action. Traditionally, it was called EU Aid Initiative. It was tailor-made, I would say, for a rather professional profile of humanitarian aid worker. Now this is going to be part of the European Solidarity Corps from next year on, which means that there will also be more attention for instance, young people with fewer opportunities. You notice perhaps that I'm formulating a little bit cautiously, and that is, as I said earlier, because we're waiting for the final legal decision. We're waiting for the final regulation that will come out hopefully soon. Of course, we are living in strange times at the moment, but the European institutions are still fully functioning. So we are hoping that European Parliament and Council of Ministers will come up with the final regulation. So I would suggest that you will all stay in touch with us in the coming months, because we are planning, and this is also very important, we are planning to come out with a call for proposals for the new European Solidarity Corps in the autumn. So that is going to be something to check. This will be a rather large call for proposals, and we will also talk about humanitarian aid strand that is new. I think I will stop here. I do not see anything, any messages coming up in the chat box. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you for the interpreter, who I believe is a compatriot of mine. And I wish you a very good webinar and a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruard. Very happy to hear that the EU is very committed to supporting youth with disabilities in the future. Now I would like to give the floor to María González and Zrinca Delic, and talk. They are from CBM Ireland, and for them to present the VIVIT project. So Maria, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. So I will share my screen. So perfect. Can you all see the presentation I'm sharing?
Yes, Maria.
Yeah, it's
Perfect.
okay.
Okay, I'll mute myself because Zrinca will start.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you, Rea, for this introduction. As you say, my name is Zrinca Delic, and I'm project manager for Vivid project. My colleague Maria and myself, we will give you a short overview of Vivid project. So, as you, yeah, as Rea already mentioned the name of our project, and I'm sure no one remember. So here is again, it's actually technical assistant in humanitarian response, ensuring valuable international volunteering and inclusion of person with disability. And this project is funded under EU Aid Volunteers program under technical assistant, and implementation start in last December. The aim of our project is to create a global community of practice which is made up of EU organizations who work towards disability inclusion in humanitarian actions and volunteering. And duration of our project is 2 years. Our project is represented by 7 consortium members from 5 EU countries. So I will shortly present each of our consortium members. I would start with Viator Christie, is Irish-based NGO with over 60 years experience in training and sending volunteers from island to developing countries. Role of Viator Christie in our project is to share that big knowledge and experience on volunteer management. The second one, EDF, European Disability Forum, as all of you know, is umbrella organization for DPOs. And through their work on advocacy, they are actually the voice of almost 100 million people with disabilities in Europe. So in our project, their role is to bring EU grant experience and ensure that all activities is accessible. Then we have Tearfund from Ireland. It's a charity organization, development organization, with the main focus on reduction of poverty in the world. And in our project, their role is to raise awareness on partners and harm caused by institutionalization in disaster and emergency situation. Then we have ASPEM organization from Italy with really, again, long experience in humanitarian aid and volunteerism. And since they have big experience on deployment under the EU Aid Volunteer Program, they will help to consortium member in a process of certification. Then Abilis, DPO organization from Finland, they act like a donor organization, and the main work is funding and support preparation, implementation, and project lead by people with disabilities in development country. In our project, their role is to bring expertise in disability inclusion and ensure correct and appropriate disability inclusion in all activities. Then we have CBM Global and CBM Ireland. Since they are same family, I will speak in general about CBM. The CBM work is to ensure help and support to people with disabilities around the world. CBM is very old organization. They work over 100 years now, and they work on the poorest places and the world. And actually, the main goal is to transfer lives of people with disabilities and build up inclusive community. In our project, CBM Global bring disability inclusion expertise and inclusive humanitarian action. Yeah, thank you, Maria. And as Rea already mentioned a little bit, we have three main objectives in our project. Through the process of learning, we will increase capacity of consortium members to manage and oversee inclusive humanitarian, disaster risk reduction, and post-disaster recovery projects. We will increase the number of certificate organizations within EU aid volunteers program. And on the end, we will create community of organization with practical knowledge and experience in inclusion, humanitarian action, and volunteerism, who will be able to share their knowledge and learn with the sector and public. Next one. And actually, why we need project like this and what that mean in practice, my colleague Maria will tell you a little bit more.
Hi. So thank you so much, Zrinca. Yes, my name is María González. I'm project coordinator for VIVIS, and it's a pleasure to be speaking today in this webinar. So yeah, so as Zrinca was saying, why are we doing this project? Why do we need projects like this one? So including and involving persons with disabilities in international programs is not only the right thing to do, but also we know that unless we involve persons with disabilities and we enhance our inclusive practices, we will continue to face difficulties in achieving what is universal inclusion. So we also know in terms of information that 15% of the world are estimated to have a disability. And in humanitarian contexts, although we don't know precisely, we know this figure increases a lot. We can say that 2 to 4 times the mortality rate is higher in humanitarian contexts. So based on the objectives that Zrinca was describing, I'm going to speak a little bit about what we want to achieve. So what's the impacts that we want to have with this project? So in terms of inclusive practices, we want to learn more about accessibility, and we want our outputs for each of the organizations that are working in the consortia to be more accessible. We want to gain more disability inclusion awareness, particularly the organizations that are not disability focused or DPOs. Within the consortia, DPOs are partnering equally with NGOs, and they're sharing their expertise for inclusive practices. So in terms of volunteer management practices, we want to enhance these practices, not only in the procedures and the policies that we need to have in place, but also good practices about volunteer deployment and volunteer management strategies. In terms of humanitarian action practices, we also need to strengthen these ones in terms of core and international recognized principles, but also with a particularly focus on inclusive capacities for humanitarian action. So here's a list of examples of some of our activities for these 2 years of project. This is not a comprehensive list. This is just some of our activities, but I think it will give you a good understanding of what is our approach. So at the moment, all of the organizations that are taking part of the consortia are undertaking an assessment process in the areas of accessibility, volunteer management, and inclusive capacities in humanitarian action. So the idea is that with the outcomes of these assessments, we could plan accordingly and shape our next activities, and also for each organization to gain awareness for beyond the project. So we are organizations that are experts in deployment and volunteer management are supporting other organizations in engaging with the certification processes through guidelines that will be in place. We set up an online community of practice where we could share knowledge, resources, expertise. This webinar actually, it's part of that online community of practice. So as you can see, some of our activities, we are opening them to the public because we understand it's very important to share what we are learning and also benefit from the input of other organizations doing the same. Peer mentoring arrangements within the organizations in the consortia. We will have many dissemination events, including international conferences, but also national learning events at the local level. We are being trained in project cycle management with a particular focus in inclusive practices. And last, but very important, we are receiving training in deinstitutionalization to incorporate this knowledge into our practices. So that was the overview of the VIVID project. Thank you very much for paying attention and for being here at all. Below, it's in these slides, there are Zrinca's and my email. So feel free to reach out if you have any other questions or just simply connect, which is always a good thing to do with people that are interested in this area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria and Zrinca. Now I would like to give the floor to our last speaker, Loredana Dicsi from EDF, and now practical examples of what volunteering is. So Loredana, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Freya. Good morning. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes,
we can. Do you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone, and thank you so much, Marion, to have invited me. And it's an honor for sure to be part of this webinar today. And volunteering, which is so important for us at EDF. Through others, I'm supporting our youth activities, youth committee, and following up certain files linked to mobility that are ongoing now in the process of re-establishing the EU budget. And one of them, of course, is the European Solidarity Corps. And indeed, as it was said by our speaker from the Commission, the Humanitarian Volunteering strand has been added recently, at least for the legal part, which is now discussed, and it is very important that this part also, as the overall of the program, becomes and will be inclusive. Volunteering is seen often when talking about disability as in a charitable way. Let's say it is seen as people with disabilities are seen as beneficiaries of those volunteer services, so they need help. We are seen as the people, vulnerable people, helpless people who need to be helped. But well, myself, I'm also a person with disability. I'm with a very, very low vision. And I can tell you that, like most of us, we want to be seen as active participants. We don't want only to benefit of this great help that volunteers are offering, but we want to be part of the society and give back what the society also gives us. And we want to do this via volunteering, for example. And this is very important, that we are seen also as part of this, and that proper measures are taken so that we can do, because if we are offered the necessary services, supporting services, the good infrastructure, and everything is barrier free, we can for sure function and work like anyone else and be very good volunteers. Volunteering is often, for persons with disabilities, a way to self-fulfillment. This competitive society of today, where everything needs to be done in a rigid structure, at a certain tempo, which often is quickly, and efficiency is also core of our society of today. For people who do not function, who cannot function in this way, it is difficult, and they are closed. They are these opportunities are taken away, and what remains often volunteering, which is, let's say, it's much more flexible, because we can volunteer, for example, once per month, we can volunteer once per week, or every day, as much as we see that we could give. And also, of course, this one, it is to be discussed with the organization or structure we are going to volunteer in. But this is for sure much more flexible than a working environment. And then often for young people and young people with disabilities, it is a place, the first trial. Even if, let's say, you are making a small mistake, it's not the end of the world, because you also have some support there as a volunteer, and it gives you the possibility to try and to get to know yourself, and to bring up your potential. So this is very important. I myself have volunteered. I'm volunteering since my university time, since 2003, and I can say with concrete examples from my environment around myself. My father, who is also a person with disability, he volunteered in the framework of his job in an NGO in his city for more than 20 years, where he gave, he's a kinesiotherapist, and he was providing some kinesiotherapy for people who couldn't pay for it, but that NGO did much more, and he was involved in other activities, in conferences they were making on awareness, but also on different topics, and also giving, for example, providing food meals for the people from the street, and so living on the street and talk to them. And he was seen as as a professional, and not as the poor person with disability who needs help. My brother did also volunteering during his studies period in the association, student association he was part of. And I have done European Voluntary Service. This is the program that was before the European Solidarity Corps started. This initiative started in 1996. I hope I remember the correct year. So when the EU started this volunteering opportunity for young people, and I came in 2005 as a European volunteer in Belgium. And I can tell you that when I left from my country, I'm Romanian, and I came to Belgium, where I am now. My national agency, this is the instance that is dealing with the management of the EU funds coming from the Solidarity Corps, and they offer support. And so you will see, you will have to do, certainly if you are doing Solidarity Corps projects with the national agencies. And I was new because I was the only one person with disability. And even it seemed their first person with disability who wanted to do a volunteering project abroad. But they were very open, and I was lucky with that. And since then, I'm so happy that many other people from Romania with disability went in volunteering projects abroad. And one of the organizations I'm volunteering, we have hosted already up to now, since 2005, when I was the first volunteer, we hosted more than 60 volunteers with visual impairment. So I can say that this became a normality now, more or less, and it's fantastic for people. And if today I'm in front of you, is thanks to this volunteering opportunity that gave me the possibility to show my potential and to develop it even more, and yeah, get further. And the European Solidarity Corps, as it is now, and this was already in the previous program, the European Volunteering Service, has some measures to support young people with disabilities. And these are, for example, the possibility to come before your project and see your hosting organization. This is of very big importance for people with disabilities, because you can see where you are going to be, maybe fix up the last details of your project, what you need maybe in your accommodation, and this is called the advanced planning visit. Then there is the possibility of mentorship offered by the program, and the most important, costs linked to disability. They can be requested in the special costs of the project. So this is part of the budget where organizations applying, they can request for. Of course, it is to the national agency to approve it or not, because they it's not right, but there is this possibility, and this is very important. These measures. And yeah, these measures, they should be made available for the whole program of European Solidarity Corps. At this moment, I know they are available for the volunteering strand. They should be made available also for the working, but as it is about volunteering, humanitarian volunteering should be also part of these measures should be made available within the humanitarian volunteering strand for persons with disabilities who would like to go and volunteering. I remember we had last year a volunteer from Uganda, if I'm not wrong. Marion, you can correct me. Our volunteer, she came for 2 months in our office, and it was fantastic to be with to be with her. In her presence, we learned so much, and she learned, of course, very much about us, but it would be great if we could also go there. Young people from Europe could go, with disabilities could go overseas and could give their help and support and be part of such projects. Unfortunately, as I see now progressing the things and budget-wise, I don't see how it can be, but I really hope that the European Commission will support this measure and will bring up, because inclusion, our speaker from the Commission just mentioned before, it is a priority. It is one of the main objectives of the program. Then how can it be inclusive if not all the parts of the programs are inclusive? So I think this should be made as a general measure, and the whole program should be uniform. Equality is so important that everyone can access all parts of the program. Just to close with one example that I had to live and I had to experience. It was when I was in high school, and it was in Romania after the revolution, it was a couple of years when volunteering became there also a trend, but not only it became a reality, let me say, because before that was there was no volunteering opportunities, or we didn't speak about that. And I went to an organization which was not far from the place where I was doing some English courses, a well-known NGO that was that published an advert on the radio that they are looking for volunteers. And I visited them and I said, yeah, I would like to volunteer. And I had a talk with one of the staff members there, dealing with volunteers, and yeah, she listened to me, and then she said, okay, we will contact you. They have never reached back to me, and when I called, they said, yeah, you will be contacted, and it never happened. And I know that one of the activities they were doing, they were preparing packages with books for schools. So it was not something where you needed an extraordinary competence. So I don't know why I couldn't be accepted there. So it was only a couple of years later that I could start my volunteering life. And I think this is not fair. Each of us should have the possibility to offer its or her help. And this can happen if all of us, we work together on it, and if the decision makers also bring the correct framework in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Loredana. It's always so good to hear practical examples, and you raised many very important issues. Now we have a few questions that have arrived. Firstly, to Ruard. I would like to find out if European Solidarity Corps has a funding option or strand similar to the EU AVI technical assistance or capacity building, so that we could apply for funding to help our international partners to become certified to host volunteers and or obtain quality label. So is there a possibility for this?
Thank you, Leah. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, good. Because I was away for 15 minutes due to network problems, but I'm back just in time, I see. No, look, the question about capacity building is a very good one. So to start with, there is no such name for any action or strand in the future Humanitarian Aid Strand. inside the European Solidarity Corps. However, there will be provisions for organizations before their project, during their project, and afterwards to do capacity building type of actions. Now, I have to be, and I apologize for that, I have to be a little bit vague about it as we are preparing them as we speak with my colleagues. But we are very much aware that part of humanitarian aid action is also to have capacity building. So what I can tell you though is that we are thinking of actions which we call complementary actions actually in the current Solidarity Corps, which can be, for instance, training activities of staff and participants in the host country, so in the country where the volunteering takes place. There is also scope for organizations at local level to be included in these activities. So, and I have to stop myself here because we are discussing all this at the moment. But you may know that last month we had a stakeholders meeting, and we have had actually 3 meetings. So with beneficiaries of EU aid volunteers, and this theme has come up at every single one of them. So we're very much aware that we have to develop something in that sense. But again, it's not like in the current EU aid volunteers initiative where you have a specific strand capacity building with specific budgetary envelope, etc. It will have to happen through support action for organizations.
Okay, thank you, Ruard. I'm happy to hear that there are some plans to include the Southern partners.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, great. Then there's another, let me see, another question which was more to CBM. Could you please elaborate more on deinstitutionalization training? So Maria or Zrinca.
Yes, so one of our partners, Tier Fund Ireland, has extensive work in the area. Sorry, I'm going to turn on my camera actually. In the area of the institutionalization. So we will have an online and then a follow-up face-to-face training that will last a couple of days. I can't precisely tell you the exact dates, but the idea is for organizations that are engaged in volunteer management and are promoting and many of the organizations that are part of the consortium has programs in countries that are not European. So enhancing our capacities for an awareness of the institutionalization will allow for plan these programs according to this approach. I hope that was a bit overview of what we meant by deinstitutionalization training.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Then there is a question for all. There are many persons with disabilities themselves who want to be volunteering within their community and where they are based, but do not know how to start. So can CVM or Solidarity Corps offer capacity building and civic engagement for such type of volunteers to motivate them? Put in mind that most developing countries are not given opportunity to use persons with disabilities in such volunteer services when they can do best. So who would like to ask CBM? Answer,
Excuse
sorry.
me, just a question back to you. I didn't quite get due to the connection. Do you speak about developing countries, third countries, or any country? I didn't get that? Sorry.
Well, the question is that within their community where they are based. So I would understand it both here in Europe and in the South.
Okay, okay. Well, perhaps I could continue then and tell you something about what the Solidarity Corps offers. This is actually an action that's quite recent. We call them solidarity projects, part of the European Solidarity Corps. I think this could be very interesting for volunteers who want to start something at local level without too much paperwork, without too much, you might call it, too many headaches involved. It's a way for a group of people, a group of young people, to run solidarity projects locally in their community. And I invite you all to check that in the European Solidarity Corps guide called Solidarity Project. They're rather small scale. They're rather, as I said, light in procedure. It's about groups of young people who can apply themselves, or an organization may apply on their behalf. The disclaimer here, or the other side of it, is that this is only for now allowed in EU countries or in countries fully participating in the Solidarity Corps. So that's basically EU and EU candidate countries. So this does not it's not valid for instance, Latin America or Asia. But nevertheless, I think this is an action where you don't need to have much knowledge about paperwork, but where you can fairly easily start. And I'm happy to provide anyone more information after the meeting on that.
Thank you, Ruard. I can see we're actually kind of running out of time, so we only have just 1 minute. Let me just ask Marian and Raquel, should we take all the questions and answer them afterwards if we take just one more? Because I can see there's quite a few questions still that we haven't answered. Yeah, I think we have to stop now. It's already 10 o'clock. So yeah, Marian or Raquel, about the questions that we haven't answered yet. Okay. Yes, so we will send the questions to the speakers, and you will get an answer later on. So just to put the camera on for the last few minutes. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I think this has been very interesting and very fruitful. I wish we had more time, but we always run out of time. So let's keep discussing, and I'm sure EDF will inform us about the next webinars. And thank you to all the speakers, and you will be receiving some questions. So thank you all. Stay safe and healthy.
Perfect.
And,
thank you very much, Ria, and everyone for being here today.
Yes. So bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.